Good evening and welcome to your view with me on JJTabane. Tonight we're coming to you from the Reserve Bank building out in Tshwane. And our guest tonight is the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. LESETJA. Governor, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us here on your view and agreeing to spend some time with us.
It's only a pleasure.
You've been in the news and congratulations for your second term, being appointed for your second term. And I'm sure there are 2 or 3 things that you can say to me you've learned from your first term that you want to improve on your second term. What would those highlights be of the work you have done for the last almost 6 years?
Look, when I came into the job, I had set myself particular objectives. I had said that there were 2 important things. Firstly, that I would like to embed the bank's financial stability mandate. The South African Reserve Bank had been overseeing the stability of the financial sector for years, but we didn't have the explicit power in law to oversee the sector as a financial stability regulator. The second one was that I felt that I would like to have the Reserve Bank to be the first point of call for young professionals who would like to ply their trade in economics and finance.
Yes.
And throughout that period, what I ended up having to do was to chart a path in what I had called Strategy 2020, where we had set out a number of strategic focus areas that the Reserve Bank had to deliver against. And we tabled our annual report in the National Assembly last year, and we had made good progress, and we had met most of our objectives. So that is the good news. What have I learned throughout this period? I had learned that as a constitutional organization, you must live true to what the Constitution tasks you with. But not only should you live true to what the Constitution tasks you with, you must actually take society along with you. And that is something that I think the Reserve Bank had not been particularly successful in. It's something that we started in the last 2 years of my previous term, that we started to accelerate, taking the Reserve Bank to the people. We have repurposed our monetary policy forums to be what we call talk to the sub forums. So that is for me a very important lesson, that a constitutional organization must embed itself in society so that it actually takes society with it in terms of executing its mandate.
I like that in terms of taking side. Take us into your confidence now on the noise that's been generated over the last couple of years about the revision of the mandate of the Reserve Bank. Earlier on in your term, in your first term, the noise was more coming from the unions, talking about, oh, don't just focus on inflation targeting, focus on how you can generate jobs and so on. Then now that this has now moved to almost a subject of squabble within the ruling party, where there's a faction that says change the mandate, there's another faction that says no, this is not necessary, it don't make any difference. Take us into your confidence. What's your view about this whole change the mandate of the Reserve Bank noise?
Central banks are very important institutions in society. They play a critical role in the economic evolution of a country. And in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, globally, societies were asking questions. The crisis has happened. Where were the central banks? That was one set of issues. The second set of issues was, well, the crisis has happened. Central banks, you have the power. Do something to make the crisis go away. And central banks didn't help the situation by coming with a narrative that said, we are the only game in town. And the narrative came that said, we are the only game in town because the other institutions in society, which were supposed to do things that would enable countries to evolve out of the financial crisis were not playing the part that they were supposed to play. So when you look at the South African Reserve Bank and you hear this noise about the mandate of the Reserve Bank, you must understand that in a democracy, there will be a contestation about institutions. There will be a contestation about what institutions do. These contestations take place in the greatest of democracies, and the contestation about the mandate of the Reserve Bank in South Africa have got to be seen in that context. And there must always be contestation in society. The tragedy of the South African discourse. The tragedy of the South African discourse is that it is more noise than a rational engagement with the issues. And if I was to sum it up for you in one sentence of what the South African contestation is, it goes something like, please don't confuse us with your facts. Now, in monetary policy, there is a basic premise that says that we all move on the basis of the same facts. You can express a different view, but you are not entitled to your own facts. We move on the basis of the same facts.
But at the heart of this debate is the question of nationalization of the bank. To say there are a range of banks, I think you quote about 11 central banks that are totally owned by the state, right? There are no private owners except for one or two central banks around the world. Why is it that it is so difficult to simply say, buy out the current private investors who, whatever small percent they own, because that's always the retort to say, no, but they are tiny, they won't hold sway, they hold very tiny shares and so on. Address that for me a little bit.
You said the 11 are state-owned central banks. No, actually, it's like the majority of central banks are owned by the state. There are only about 7 that still have private no, not private owners, private shareholding. Yes. Right? They've got private shareholder participation. They are not owned by the private shareholders because they are institutions of society. So, and your introduction, which said that why don't you just buy them out? That's an interesting one, because that's exactly the point we have raised. To say that you want these shareholders to go away, you're going to have to buy them out. How much are you prepared to make them buy out? And if you had the money to pay them out, whatever the amount is, would you use that money to build a dam, a road, a hospital, or a school? Or would you just use it to buy these private shareholders to what? In any event, don't hold sway. To what purpose? And as far as we are concerned as the central bank, we think we have said everything that ought to be said about the nationalization debate, and we don't think that any further comments by us actually make any difference. But
tell me, there's another narrative now that says there's a fear that the argument to get the private owners out, right, is a precursor, right, to even further distorting the management of the reserve, especially when it comes to what can loosely be called printing of money. Have you heard that argument?
I haven't quite heard the argument, but I also would not comment about the motives of the people who are pushing for nationalization. Suffice to say that this is, as I had said, this is not our debate. It's not a debate now that the Reserve Bank still wants to be involved in. If you want to talk about the mandate of the bank, that's a different ball game. And like I said,
the current mandate.
Well, whether it's the current mandate or some change of mandate, it doesn't matter. As I had said, these contestations take place in the greatest of democracies. The South African Reserve Bank mandate is spelled out in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Weren't they students of history, the authors of our Constitution? Because you see, they knew, and they had seen this thing elsewhere in the world, that when difficult decisions are supposed to be made, the political leadership of society would actually postpone making those decisions and probably push institutions to do things that are beyond what institutions are capable of doing. And so the authors of the Constitution shielded the South African Reserve Bank from a political cycle and gave it a mandate that we must focus on. And there isn't a single central bank that I know of whose mandate is just inflation, and that is it. Societies spell these mandates in different ways. The Australians have it that you must pursue price stability so that you can promote the welfare of Australians. Yeah. The UK has it as its price stability so that you could raise the living standards of the British people. The South African Constitution says you must do price stability in the interest of balanced and sustainable growth in the Republic. So these things are framed. So we pursue price stability because the authors of our Constitution understood that price stability is a necessary condition for balanced and sustainable growth in our country. Understandably, it is not a sufficient condition, but it is a necessary condition. There are other institutions that the Constitution creates that must contribute to balanced and sustainable growth. But the authors of the Constitution understood the primary object of the Reserve Bank is that of price stability.
I want to, after the break, talk a little bit about that sustainable growth, right? A lot of people are saying the Reserve Bank ought to re-look at how it can play a greater part in stimulating economic growth. The economic growth has been terrible over the last couple of months, hovering under just over 0%, and just being revised now by the IMF again, when we're looking forward to more growth. So after the break, I want to talk about that growth. What do you think should be the mandate or the role of the Reserve Bank going forward, given the current economic impasse? We're talking to the Reserve Bank governor out at the Reserve Bank building in Tshwane. Stay tuned for more.